Hi guys, it's time for yoga with Jenny. A little bit trouble getting online, but here I am. I thought we'd continue on with sort of it is a little bit of our traditional yogic approach to hip opening, specifically in regards to the hip flexors. I was talking a lot in the past few weeks about posture and specifically how our back and our pelvis kind of work together, and how we can make changes about that posture, specifically when we find ourselves getting locked into kind of that exaggerated sway back posture where the pelvis tilts forward. So what tightens here is at the front of the pelvis, front of the hip gets tight, the quads get tight, the hip flexors, and our paraspinal muscles, among others. So we're going to do a little bit more with opening those areas up today. And so, of course, the other side involves strengthening. So I always love to accompany that length, that stretching, that flexibility training with, how to correct it with muscles getting more strong. So one side is you need to open up, but the other side is we need to kind of zip up and close the top. So working on abdominal strength, core strength, and hip flexor lengthening today. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with a kind of a more traditional hip flexor stretch. So you can place yourself up on a bolster, you can have blocks, or you can have even just a small blanket roll. I'm going to use my bolster. And we're going to begin here with a couple of deep breaths. And feel how your breath is moving, how your body is opening and closing. You can picture the way an umbrella would open up. We've got rain today. And if you can sense how another part of that anterior pelvic tilt, that kind of posture sway back, is that part of the umbrella doesn't move. That back muscle tightness, hip muscle tightness leads to that kind of pushed forward appearance in the ribs, open abdominals. So it's kind of a broken umbrella. So let's see if we can move the umbrella all around, every direction. So as we breathe in, not only going up towards the ceiling and then back down and into your body, but also sides. And also back body. So easy to forget our ribs, they go back into our back too. So if you think about kind of trying to open the space between the ribs and the space between the scapula, so your upper back. So coming from that nice openness, we're going to start with strengthening and drawing in. And it's tricky. It's tempting to just want to kind of tuck your butt and close everything up again. But you can see how my upper body began to close in. So I was using other muscles, shoulders, chest, neck, besides my core. So I'm going to take my upper body and open it up. And then with my exhale, I think about that mula bandha. Mula bandha means the contraction of the pelvic floor. So the lift of the muscles at the very deepest part of you, lowest part of you. And then your abdominals are engaging as well. Kind of feeling like you're drawing together like a zipping motion inside your body. Inhale to relax. And again, feel that openness. Exhale to contract. So depending on how high you have lifted your pelvis, you may feel more discomfort in your back, because this is putting us into a place where our back has curves. It has those kind of a little bit of that tilt that our back is maybe not used to having. So a little bit of arch in the back, but then the pelvis being dropped down. The chest being lifted, the head coming back in line with the pelvis is really where we're going in terms of posture. So if it's difficult, make this lump smaller. And the challenge for this is a heel slide. So if your mat is not very slippery, you can always go on a floor. You know, just simply roll up your mat so that you can get to a floor. Put a towel under your foot if your floor is not slippery. Deep breath. And then as I exhale, and feel that engagement through Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, the core zipper. Reach one leg long. So the beginning of the iliopsoas, one of our hip flexors, is right here. It's behind the belly button at the 12th thoracic vertebra, and then it goes down through the lumbar as well. It attaches to those low back segments. If that is tight, it's going to probably pull our back again into that anterior pelvic tilt, arching sway back, right, as our leg moves away because of the tightness in the front of the hip. So what we're looking for it to do instead is to hold steadiness in your back at the origin of that muscle, and to be able to lengthen away. So the front of the hip needs to stretch and lengthen to reach the leg away. But what needs to hold are your core muscles. So again, if this is hard for you to do with your hips lifted, start out with your hips on the ground. And just noticing that my back isn't flat, right? So I have a little bit of curvature in my low spine, a little mouse house. And then as I reach, it doesn't change. So it should not become a big curve. And then try both sides. So compare your two sides. If you have practiced leg slides before heel slides and you want to challenge yourself a little bit, what I would add is a oppositional arm reach. So I would reach the opposite arm over my head and then return. And we know that that's because of where the arm inserts into our back, which is kind of up where that back starts to get tight, right, through this thoracic portion. And then that psoas comes in and kicks in and gets tight as well. So if those muscles are all tight, what it'll look like is really arching in the back as you try to move your arm overhead, shoulder shrugging and arching your back. So what we want to try to look for is, or try to keep rather, is the shoulder, whoop, I'm doing the same side, the shoulder movement without your back compensating. Hip movement, so the leg reaching without your back compensating. Good, and then we come back. If you're lifted, you want to stay lifted, stay lifted. If you weren't, you want to try the lift for a deeper stretch. Lengthen one of those legs forward. Now, if I really let go, you'll see my back really come into that arched position. So instead, I do want to emphasize the lengthening, but instead I want to keep a sense of strength and drawing together from pubic bone to navel. And one way we can help our back, right, to help keep that is to pull the opposite knee up. Now you'll notice that that started to pull my knee up, it started to bend my knee. That's tightness talking, right? So now my hip is really being challenged to let go.
It feels like a deeper stretch for me when I pull my knee in. If you don't feel much of anything, this is a lovely lengthener to do hanging your leg off of a bed or a chair. Or if you're on a yoga block, go higher. Right? Take yourself up into a higher setting so that the angle for releasing the leg down is deeper. But don't forget about core strengthening and drawing in that knee, which tilts my pelvis, right? It's tilting me into a posterior pelvic tilt. It's creating more of a drawing up with the pelvis, and then the leg has to, the muscles in the hip have to let go to let the leg drop down. Now, if you're really struggling with hip flexor tightness, you feel a lot either in your back, right, in that area behind the belly button where I was poking, or you feel it right in the front of the hip, a lot of tightness and tension, then you may need to contract your opposite muscle a little bit more. So try contracting your glutes here. And I'm thinking just of this cheek, right? Contracting here, the side that I'm stretching. I'm trying not to contract the other side too. Gently bend both knees. And sometimes it's too hard to stretch the leg and lift the other knee up. So if you want a gentler way to get into it, hug the knee up first. Right, because that's going to really bring your back into that, again, that posterior pelvic tilt. It's going to protect your back as you then start to try to lengthen the leg forward. Yeah, that to me felt much more easy in my SI region, right? Sometimes that back gets so cranky when we're in that open position. So this is possibly a little tighter for me. My foot is actually off the floor. Neither side, my foot was firmly on the floor. So noticing those little twists and turns in your pelvis and unevenness. Back to 2 knees bent. If you're on a height, take that away. Notice what you notice in terms of back, the shape of your back, how it touches the mat. Feeling in your hips. Just be here with your body. Good. Coming to one side and coming up, or you can rock and roll all the way up through the center. Come up onto your hands and knees. Let's start by moving into cat and cow. And what I'm paying attention to here is the movement of the pelvis and what that means for my back in terms of comfort, discomfort, pull, tug, stretch, just pain even on one side. Does that still exist? Or can you feel yourself shifting from side to side? Or does it feel more or less even? So both as you're drawing those hip points up and as you're stretching and elongating, there's again that space of the abdominals and that space of the hip, the front of the hip, and how it relates to the space in the lumbar spine, the space through the middle back and the rib cage, how that space can shift and change if the muscles are willing to lengthen and contract. in a balanced way. Sometimes I even get into, very, very microscopic differences, but is your right hip bone moving faster than your left? Or can you get a sense of your right sit bone and your left sit bone and whether they're moving at the same rate? And then specifically working to open up that space. Step 1 foot forward, come to your Anjane. And I always love to have people in Anjane just stack the bones up. So my knee, my hip, my rib, my shoulders, my head are right on top of each other. So it's not this kind of a low lunge where you're kind of arching your back. It's really about getting more to that neutral position for the pelvis and for your spine. And how do we get there, right? It's not about, tucking under, right? You can see why that's not where we want to go. But it's really just, again, can you feel that lift through the front of the hip bones, like that cat stretch, the beginning of cat stretch, the lift of the pubic bone, front ribs drawing in. And you can even engage this glute a little bit and start to feel along the hip, along the thigh. Maybe it feels longer, more open. I've been really enjoying, I got this from Sarah Duvall, who has a wonderful website you should check out, Core Exercise Solutions. Amazing, smart physical therapist. She's wonderful. Instead of coming forward like we often do in that lunge and kind of spilling the pelvis, I want you to think of holding from your head to your knee. Walk your foot further forward a little bit, and then just move the whole of your body like one piece. And then come back over the knee. So if I do this right, I'm still going to feel more length come into my front of my hip, because again, I'm moving my hip away from my knee, right? So I'm stretching and lengthening that space, but without adding more impact to my back by bending in my back and loosening my core, right? So I'm holding strong and steady and just leaning. At the same time, I'm not leaning forward like rounding. It's just nice and neutral. So I like to do a couple rounds of this. If you go forward, keep your hands on your hip bones. There is a limit. I don't know where your limit will be. Mine's about here-ish when my pelvis starts to kind of sneak into a twist. That's when I know this muscle can't stretch anymore. I've gone far enough. And then just going one step further, I'm going to reach back up. So I've transferred my weight back over this back knee and reach up, again, without arching. And I'm going to lean away from that hip, side stretching. The side stretching, again, is just getting at more length because I'm moving the origin of the muscle, which is up in here, near my belly button, away from the knee. And then come back to center. And you can take any evener, anything in the center that you like. Down facing dog, moving through a vinyasa, sitting in child's pose is what I'm going to choose. And then we have one more side. Simply starting with that idea of 360 degrees of breathing and wrap around strength.
pelvis that's not dumping forward, but also not tucking under, somewhere in the middle, the sweet spot. If you feel like you need more, then you wiggle the front foot further forward so you'll have somewhere to go. Take your body and just pitch it forward, keeping it long and neutral, and then come back. So I'm thinking hip bones like headlights. I'm pointing straight forward as I go, 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 only as far as I can go. On this side for me, I feel this a little bit more in the thigh. I know I have quad tightness, so that makes sense. And if you come back, reaching up and reaching to the side, again, that's going to lengthen that space. You can engage that back glute a little bit. And come on back. You might see me working with my roll. I like to do my child's pose over roll. I'm working on kind of correcting my back tightness that's kind of right below the rib cage. Actually, it's more or less at the base of my rib cage. I have a tremendous amount of flattening and tension. So I'm trying to push back into my back by curling in the front. But again, your transition is your own. As you come back up, we're going to do one more. And this is a little bit more active. Up on hands and knees. Sending one leg back. The foot is still on the floor in order to feel that pressure downward is what I need to feel the beginning of strength in my hip. So sometimes in that kind of that sway back posture where our pelvis tilts, the glutes you can see are really lengthened, right? They're not in a position where they want to contract. So when we then go into exercises, movements where we expect those muscles to contract, it's really hard to feel it. So when you push against something, getting some feedback against your foot is one way. I like to do this with a foot on a wall. If you had a wall, put your foot on the wall and try to push into the wall. So bringing my foot up the wall rather than down here is going to give me a little bit more in the back of my leg, a little more demand for those glute muscles, glute max specifically. If you look at yourself, if you're doing this to a video and you notice that your back is kind of swayed, again in that area that I was just mentioning, I want you to push down with your palms, lift up over your ribs, lift up between pubic bone and navel a little bit without rounding and dropping your head. And then slowly touch down. And press the other heel back. Whether you're on the floor with the ball of the foot or you lift it up. You can see there, my back wanted to do a tremendous adjustment on this side. Ooh, this is my tighter hip flexors, right? So as I go to lift that leg into space or like lifting my foot up onto the wall, I'm going to have to work a lot harder with my abdominals and need some left glute strengthening. So this is a good one for me to work on. And last but not least is our release work. Again, returning to release. So I'm going to lay back on a bolster. And this is an effort to have a little bit more openness in the front, not only through the pelvis, but also through our back. So much of the time when we have that sway back posture, we tend to tuck our bottom under, and we kind of bend at the rib cage, tightening those abdominals down, kind of in an effort to get better posture, to kind of get our backs to stop swaying so much. So we actually do want a little bit of opening movement right at the ribs and those upper abdominals, which again comes back to having a little bit of curvature in the back. For many of us, our low back has kind of lost that forward curve. So when we lay back on a bolster, we emphasize having a little bit of that curvature. You can see from the tailbone up towards my ribs has a little bit of curvature. Now I do want to exhale, draw Mula Bandha up, pull those ribs down. And then you can stay here. Yes, my hips are bent here, that's fine if it's better for your back, right? Remember, as we did those leg slides, if going to a straight leg is gonna really pull on your back, then you wanna stay bent. If you want to stretch the legs out, and you can have that openness, try it out. Again, arms kind of opening up is going to help with our chest closing down. And it's Tuesday, so we don't have one of those fun mnemonics. Monday metta is what they call it, what Jack Kornfield loves to talk about. Meditation, of course, is self-compassion. We'll do Tuesday metta. It doesn't have the alliteration. But we'll give ourselves those wonderful affirmations right here as a follow-up to this beautiful opening for hips, for chest, for belly. So in your mind, or even out loud if you're on your own and you want to, you think, I am safe. May I be safe. I am happy. May I be happy. May I be free. I am free. May I be at peace. And may I live with more ease, my body, mind, and heart. From here, if your legs are outstretched, bend them. If your arms are open, bring them into your heart center and roll off to one side. Press gently back up. We take it, that metta meditation, that compassion meditation, that self-love meditation, and we turn it open to the world. May we be safe. May we be happy. May we be at peace. May we be healthy. May we live with more ease in our body, mind, and our heart. Namaste. Thank you, my friends. Hopefully this felt good on your hips.